We're a week removed from when the SEC was actively tampering with every one of the Big 12's best quarterbacks, and they got none of them. This is a Locked On Big 12 Locked On Cyclones crossover.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to a Locked On Big 12 Locked On Cyclones crossover. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. And that is Nick Maravets of Locked On Cyclones talking all things Iowa State. Thanks for making our shows your first listen every single day. The SEC was shocked, stunned when their NIL money and their Rocky Top and their cool river by the stadium weren't enough to lure away Rocco Becht or Avery Johnson or Sawyer Robertson or other major Big 12 quarterbacks. They had to settle with the kid from UCLA who none of us have ever heard of. We'll dive deep into how those conversations went with Becht and company. Then Iowa State and BYU were 15th and 16th in the transfer portal, but that's not a bad thing. It's actually kind of good continuity. What we know about continuity, and then we'll finish with Sacramento State is coming to the Big 12. Maybe not, but it'd be kind of cool if they did. They just hired Shaq as their basketball GM. Bring me Shaq and the Sack. If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. Nick Maravets, your quarterback was on the trade block, according to Tennessee fans, but it seems as though in his own psyche, as he was buying video game consoles for the sick children of Ames, Iowa. The Rocco Becht was never going to leave. The SEC completely struck out trying to lure away the #1 quarterback, maybe in this entire league.
Well, it wasn't even close from what I've heard. Like, obviously there was conversations after Iowa State's kind of disappointing end is how I'll put it to the season. I think over as a whole, it was a great season, but I think everyone wanted to win the Big 12 championship. There were a lot of conversations of Rocco Becht to the SEC, a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on. That was phase one. Rocco Becht turned them all down. Then obviously the Nico Iamaleava situation occurs. It is what it is. Rocco Becht, obviously a quarterback that could make a move, potentially didn't end up doing that. And I think a lot of that comes down to the culture at Iowa State, and also just from what I've heard from Brent Bloom is the guy who runs the We Will Collective, and he said like there were a lot of guys that reached out, and Rocco never really gave him a chance. That only supports that culture initiative that I talk so much about on Locked On Cyclones. It feels like every day what Otts and Campbell have built here, it's second to none, and that's what we're seeing not only from top quarterbacks, but I mean, when Matt Campbell's talking about spring games, he said, like, I'm not scared to play a spring game because people are going to tamper with our guys, and we've seen that before, and people stay. We just don't want to do a spring game this year. It's across the entire roster, not just Rocco Becht.
Rocco staying at Iowa State was a surprise to Tennessee fans, as was Sawyer Robertson or Avery Johnson. Sam Leavitt, a spattering of quarterbacks in this conference that were rumored to have been highly recruited by Tennessee and their boosters. And look, I've mentioned this on my show a lot. You can do it. Nick, if you look across the country and say, man, I really want Jackson Dart to play. Is he still at Ole Miss?
He just got drafted.
Wow, good for him. If you say, I want Jackson Dart last year to play for Iowa State, you individually could just DM him. It's not tampering, right? Like you have the free will and free speech as a human being in this country to DM him and say, I'll give you $1 million out of my pocket through Roy or another NIL service if you come play for my school. That's not tampering because the NCAA doesn't own you. So there are legal ways that Tennessee boosters could call Rocco Becht and say, here is the number we would lay out if you wanted to play quarterback for us. Did you ever feel like, whether it's Becht or somebody else in this conference, Tennessee's next signal caller was going to come from the Big 12?
It's hard to, when you get presented with a number as large as the number that was being thrown around from Tennessee or from really any SEC or Big Ten school, for myself, it's hard to imagine myself turning down that number. Sure, yeah. Right. And so for any of these guys that are almost the same age as I, a couple of years younger even, to see that number on paper and to turn it down like that, to me, it didn't ever, it was never a 0% possibility. Like that it's such a large number, but I do think that at Iowa State, like I said, that culture across the Big 12, I don't know if it's the same for school to school, but there's also the argument of the league you're playing in, right? So if you're going to be playing Cincinnati in a new model of Colorado every year, as opposed to, Alabama and Georgia in the SEC, that's a decision that has to be made as well. I never thought it was 0%, but I was never super confident that any of them were going to make the move, if that makes sense.
I think we are getting close to the Big 12 having a cohesion across the board to understand everyone is blue collar. If you come play in this league, you come to be developed at a program that is intent on developing human beings, on developing 2 and 3 stars into 4 and 5 star collegiate players or elite level collegiate players, or even having the Will Howards of the bunch, right? It's kind of hard to blame that guy who got to go win a national championship. And in the end, Kansas State got to have Avery Johnson at starting quarterback, which was not something that K-State fans hated. There are ways in which the portal works well for the Big 12, even in guys that move on. But overall, the kids that stayed, I think, have shown you what the culture of this conference is going to be moving forward. Everyone agreeing, yeah, we might make $2.5 million instead of $4 million. But that is the price we pay for loyalty. That is the price we pay for program building, for playing for Matt Campbell for 4 years, or playing for Chris Kleiman for 4 years, Dave Aranda for 4 years. And that's the trajectory, I think, of this conference. Coming up, Iowa State, BYU, no say transfer portal. Como se dice no mas transfer portal. This is the Locked On Big 12, Locked On Cyclones crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hey, today's show, this one is brought to you by Monarch Money. And the reason it's brought to you by Monarch Money is because I'm 24 now. Nick, 23? 22?
Yes, 23.
So Nick and I don't do the whole money thing very well. I'm going to speak on behalf of both of us because we're just like, I don't know what a Roth IRA is. Monarch Money is our own personal CFO. So you don't have to say, where'd my money go? Monarch Money tells you. You get full visibility. So I realized I'm spending a lot on food delivery. It's Sunday afternoon. I want some food delivery. I put in for some food delivery, and then all my money is gone. So I'm not managing my money now. I'm building wealth because of Monarch Money, because I can see it. It's an accountability thing. Instead of juggling multiple apps too, it's my one-stop shop to track everything, and you can manage with your partner. It's smoother than ever, setting goals, having joint accounts and personal accounts, and staying on the same page. Use code LOCKEDONCollege with Monarch Money at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year at Monarch Money. Nick Maravetz, Locked On Cyclones, where he talks about Iowa State. Speaking of, Iowa State and BYU were 15 and 16. At least that's where they sit as the transfer portal comes to a close in college football this second spring window. How you say not good. You don't necessarily strive to be last in that category overall as this thing closes. That's combining per 24/7 the open window in the winter and now the spring one. But I hear a lot of the arguments from Iowa State fans and BYU fans. Hey, ever heard of the word continuity? A lot of players coming back. You don't need a ton of new players. The ones you got were key in positions that you can plug and play where you actually needed them. And outside of that, don't touch anything. Don't change anything. We're good. Is it a good thing that Iowa State and BYU are last in this conference in the transfer portal?
Well, let me ask you this before I dive in here. Where would you say Iowa State is weakest on their roster right now?
I'm going to go with wide receiver. You're going to need a couple wide receivers because you lost 2 guys who were top 3-4 round NFL draft picks, right? Yeah.
Yep. Well, we got those in the first transfer portal. So Chase Sowell and Xavier Townsend out of East Carolina, and I believe UCF is where Xavier Townsend came from. So we've kind of got that base covered. Then outside of that, Iowa State is.
Tell me, did you get any new offensive linemen? You could probably use a couple tackles, maybe.
We've brought some linemen in this portal
so
from IU.
You're telling me the holes there have been plugged.
Minor holes for Iowa State, and Iowa State immediately just boom, bam, pow. All of a sudden, we are squeaky clean. I love this roster, and I've talked to some people, and there's conversations of, well, this team might not be as good as last year. I was absolutely shocked to hear that. Like, legitimately, I think this team is bar none, bare minimum, a Big 12 title contender because of the injuries it had last year. Iowa State is being overlooked because like, oh, we're not bringing in that many guys and whatever. We don't need to. We had 6, 7 guys in the linebacker position who were hurt last year. Tight end was banged up as well. We lost some wide receivers, but we brought in basically duplications of the 2 we lost in Chase Sowell and Xavier Townsend. Very similar builds. Obviously, they are their own people. Like, I get that as well. But we're going to fill that hole. Running back, we didn't lose anybody. We're only getting older there. Rocco replacing the same spot that he obviously was in last year. Like, it's the same dude, so we know what we're getting there. I am not concerned about this roster at all. And to be completely honest, with where we sit with roster limitations, what's that going to look like? I don't hate the lack of additions for Iowa State because it seems like this roster is already set. Like, we're at linebacker, we might be 10 deep. Would you like us to add a linebacker? I don't think we could even take it.
I don't know if I want you to add linebacker, please. It's fine. There's enough linebackers. You've made your point is made at that position. And for BYU, I know that Jake Hatch can't speak for them here, but hey, we need a defensive lineman. Okay, Keanu Tanavasa and the Purcell kid come in. Hey, we kind of need a tight end. Carson Ryan comes in. Maybe a new linebacker, Max Alford. So you're not even replacing necessarily. I know that Iowa State's lost a couple to the portal. BYU's lost a couple to the portal. You're not exactly replacing guys on the roster you needed to. You're plugging and playing where it's necessary. And if it helps anybody, you're going to hear this. I think there'll be some Big 12 fans, whether it's a Cincinnati fan or UCF fan or a Utah fan, saying, "Oh, how could you ever spin it in a positive way that a team was last in the Big 12 in the transfer portal?" Can I ask you this, Nick? Per 24/7. These 4 teams are the bottom 4 teams in the Big 12 in transfer portal rankings in 2025. Arizona State, Kansas State, Iowa State, BYU. What do they all have in common?
They're good at football.
They're good at football. They're kind of good at the whole like culture and football thing. So it's not just of course, he's picking out a couple of schools and trying to make them look good. No! The good teams, the best teams in this league, the championship contenders from last year aren't exactly going portal crazy.
Well, and another point, too, I was going to make this in the first segment, but I feel like it's applicable here as well. I took a look at everyone that went to the NFL from Iowa State last year. Not only the 4 that were drafted, but the 5 that went as free agents as well. The average time spent at Iowa State, can you guess how many years it was?
It's got to be pushing 4. Please tell me.
It's 4. It is 4. That's the average undergraduate degree length. That's how long they were here on average. Now you're going to have a few guys that came in for 1 or 2, but we also had a few guys that were here for 5 or 6. So that averages out. I think that right there, you're going to see that continuity factor, right? So could we have maybe brought in a guy at DB, like, in my opinion, one of the weaker spots for Iowa State? Maybe. I suppose if you were to plug and play and get rid of a few, maybe that would work. But I mean, we've seen in the past just how valuable it is to stay at not only not only Iowa State, but at other Big 12 programs for years on end and to develop into those top tier players. Darian Porter started as a wide receiver before getting picked 68 overall to the Raiders as a defensive back. The development is very prominent, not only at Iowa State, but across the Big 12.
I think so. And to that point, Nick, this is a conference where those 4 years are even more impressive, whether it's Iowa State or Kansas State, that I think would be similar, or BYU would be similar. It's even more impressive when you think that includes adding guys in. You think about that 4 years like, oh, well, if a guy leaves after 3 years and that hurts your 4 years. Yeah, but it also hurts you if you sign a fifth-year senior. It hurts if you sign a grad student. It means that not only are the Iowa States of the world not losing guys to the portal, they're not really bringing them in. Matt Campbell is going over to West Des Moines and saying, hey, I know you're a 3-star, want to play left tackle for Iowa State, and we develop you into a Big 12 championship, college football playoff caliber player. And that's what these athletes are doing. They're going from relatively unheard of, low-rated players out of high school to being developed by some of the best developers in the nation, like a Matt Campbell. Ryan Day is not a developer. Ohio State is not taking athletes and flipping them into great young men who go into the world and are successful. That's what you're going to find at a Baylor, at even an Oklahoma State, who I'll kind of rag on here in a second, or now a Kansas, or the aforementioned Arizona State, Kansas State, Iowa State, BYU. Here's another point that I think backs this up. If you are a fan of Houston, 25 transfer portal guys. Oklahoma State, 36. West Virginia, 40. UCF, 36. Some of the teams who are on the lower half of the Big 12, that's where they're trying to compensate or overcompensate, is bringing in new guys. And guess what? I commend you. A lot of you kind of sucked last season. Teams that had high expectations weren't good. Like, hey, these guys on our roster aren't good enough to play in the Big 12, aren't good enough to win in the Big 12. We need to overhaul. At that point, it makes a lot more sense in my brain that these schools would do that. These coaches would do that. Those are the teams that need transfer portal commits. Arizona, on the other hand, Cincinnati, who are both sitting kind of teetering outside the top 10 in the Big 12 in transfer portal rankings, you need to be top 5 in this. You need to revamp your roster, and they haven't done it. Those are the schools that were bad last year. They need better athletes. They haven't done that at a high level. I think those two schools will suffer because of that next season. Arizona and Cincinnati, probably two of the bottom 3 or 4 teams in this conference, at least in 2025. Coming up, Sacramento State to the Big 12. Sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? What if I told you I'm a bit of a Nostradamus on this one on Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network with Locked On Cyclones, your team every day. Nick Maravetz of Locked On Cyclones. What you know, man, about you live in the Midwest. What do you know about Sacramento State? The 20th. Not a whole lot. Well, let me tell you, the 20th largest media market in America. Adding Sacramento State gives you a nice new media market. How about they're building a massive new football stadium for a gajillion and gabillion dollars? And Sacramento State, being in Northern California, gives you the grip on not just California, but also a brand new time zone moving forward. Sacramento State is transitioning into the FBS, and some people have estimated their NIL to be $35 million. On top of that, they just hired Shaquille ONeal as their general manager in basketball, and there were rumors they were going after high-caliber former NFL players like Michael Vick as their head coach in football. They've got the money. They've got the market. They've got the fan support. I think it would behoove a league like the Big 12 to jump before someone else does, to get in on the lottery ticket before everyone else buys into the lottery.
I think it's the perfect opportunity. It feels like, sometimes when you're looking at just landscapes as a whole, and you're kind of like, what can we do to really elevate? You need the X factor, right? You need to do something that just is a little bit out of the ordinary to really jump into that next level. The Big 12 is considered small, little brother to the SEC and the Big 10 for how many years now? What if this is the move that it might not make a whole lot of sense up front, but is what is actually a piece by piece kind of down the line move that can elevate the Big 12 into that same conversation? I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense up front. I understand that. But with Shaq on board, anything is possible.
Yeah, what you're going to have. People will see this headline. They'll see the comment section will light up saying, "Oh, this is stupid. What do these guys know?" This is like we've caught lightning in a bottle. Like, we knew that Puka Nacua was going to be a great NFL player before anybody else. We predicted something like that. We predicted Mr. Tom Brady's career, right? If any team has the knowledge that, what is it? Is 2020 the hindsight's 2020? If you had the hindsight to draft Tom Brady, everyone would go back and take Tom Brady. This is that caliber of football program to me. Considering they have now full membership in the FBS, considering the rumors of $30 million to build their roster via the NIL, which most Big 12 teams can't even sniff. Those things are massive. And the idea that a guy like Shaquille O'Neal has bought in, a guy like Michael Vick considered buying in. A lot of people are taking Sac State seriously, and they're about to play at a conference with UNLV and Air Force. And sure, Nevada is not this massive brand that everybody loves to talk about, but that UNLV, Air Force, like, those are schools that have been in consideration to make a jump, to move up, to level up in college football, and Sac State's already passed them in so many areas. I don't see how getting ahead of the curve can hurt you to a detrimental point.
I agree. And, beyond the football side of things, you look at basketball, obviously Shaq, basketball guy. I feel like we can all agree on that.
Lots of money too.
Yeah, a lot of money. Dude is a human too, like a very large human, which is, I feel like, a huge just plus. I don't really know how that equates to anything. I just think that's awesome. But when you look at as soon as Shaq joins Sacramento in this whole deal, Mikey Williams from UCF, immediate commit, former 4-star, you're going to see a large kind of influx of talent just to be able to be in the same building as Shaq. And Big 12 being a predominantly basketball conference, let's not get too crazy here or too ahead of ourselves, but I wouldn't be too surprised if Sacramento State makes some moves up in the basketball side of things. Not so much the football, I get that. But in basketball, there's potential there. And for them to be in the conference that the Big 12, obviously the Big 12 conference, like that could be a positive, right? They make the tournament, they make a few wins, boom, you're looking at potential new revenue there as well. I just feel like overall, it's not going to hurt you as much as some will think.
Yeah, this is according to Front Office Sports, the Sac-12, which is what they're calling themselves because they would love to jump to the Pac-12, eventually the Big 12. Their athletic director actually said their stretch goal is to become a member of the Big 12 in coming years. According to Front Office Sports, I was off on that number. They've actually raised $50 million in NIL. Most small schools could build their football stadium with that kind of money, and their goal in that is to reach the Pac-12 in the Mountain West for the time being, prove themselves with the resources of a conference in the FBS, and then jump to the Big 12 with their new goal being $75 million. They say they are at $60 million per Sacktown Sports that has already been raised as they build this new football stadium, trying to prove, hey, Sacramento is the kind of play where the A's are playing right now, where the Kings play. It's a pro sports market, and Sacramento State is making milestone moves to come into the FBS in a flashy fashion like James Madison did. They walked in and they won immediately. That's what Sac State wants to do. This is a move. I'm going to liken it vaguely to BYU, which I know is crazy, but NIL numbers wise, that kind of stacks up here. BYU got to the Big 12, and the second that the NCAA said, yeah, you can pay players, and yeah, you can go to the Big 12 and get way more money in TV revenue, BYU skyrocketed. They said, all right, well, we now have access to Power 4, Power 5 revenue. We're going to utilize that to build a great team and win. Nick, that might be the fuel you have to add to the fire. You give a school like Sac State, who is building the infrastructure right now, you give them the ticket to Power 4 resources and money. I think that's the catalyst to have a really strong member.
Absolutely. And especially when you consider if the Big 12 were to dive into this immediately, instead of letting them get to kind of that in-between level before they jump, the Pac-12, they're not really a Power 4 anymore per se. If they jump in now before anyone kind of puts them on their radar to say, obviously the ACC, it'd be a wild get for them, obviously with the Atlantic Coast Conference, but maybe the Big 10 or the SEC or whatever the case might be. The Big 12 can jump in right now. And also, we haven't talked about this. We talk about this sometimes. What about time zones? The Big 12 jumping into, I don't know if we have any on this. Is this the Pacific time zone? I don't even know if I know.
Arizona has the weird thing where sometimes they're mountain time, sometimes they're not. The Big 12 occasionally will say it has 4 time zones. It doesn't. Arizona
half the year. Yeah,
Arizona just doesn't do the daylight savings time thing, which I still don't know how to get around it. They're just like, you know what? No. For these few months, we are the West Coast. And I think federally, the law is like, I don't know if we can do anything about this. So
is this something we can stop?
This would unlock your first 12-month-a-year member who is in the Pacific time zone, yes.
I feel like that's a huge get because, yeah, obviously the East Coast dominates, but what about like what the Pac-12 after dark was, right? What if we start to venture into, because we've talked like, should the Big 12 explore playing on Fridays? Or when I was talking a couple weeks ago, like, what if the Big 12 plays on Wednesdays or something ridiculous just to get numbers up, to be able to boost those viewership numbers to get into this potential new 12-team playoff? If we can harness what the Pac-12 after dark was and bring that into the Big 12, obviously that's not going to help necessarily Iowa State per se, because it's not Iowa State's viewership numbers. But if Iowa State were to come out to Sacramento for a Pac-12 quote unquote after dark game, a Big 12 after dark game, I feel like that's something we should consider.
It's not a bad location. I've been Northern California is not a bad location. Sacramento would be it's a major market to add to your belt. Not to say that Waco's bad, not to say Ames is bad or Manhattan is bad, but having a major market it doesn't really hurt you. Looking at you, Boston College, who has stunk in a lot of sports, but because they're in Boston, they have the infrastructure to still be a semi-valuable member to a power conference. And that is something for them that has taken them a long-ish way. Nick, invigorating conversations today, and we will see you again on Thursday night on the Big 12 Squad Show on both your channel and the Locked On Big 12 channel. Where can folks find more of your work?
You can find us at Locked On Cyclones, your team every day, of course, and also at Nick_Marv on Twitter, putting out hot takes there, mostly cold takes, but cold takes can be heated up in the refrigerator. No, the microwave. The microwave, not the refrigerator.
Wow. You're going to put your cold takes in the refrigerator to heat them up. That's an example of a cold take.
Look at that. Look, we're literally in front of your eyes promoting the cold takes. This is rough.
Unreal. That is Nick Maravets of Locked On Cyclones. Go to him for your Iowa State stuff and just to be generally entertained. You had a video of like 30,000 views recently about the whole Rocco Becht deal, which is kind of rocks. Just saying, kind of rocks. This has been It Always Will Be a Crossover with Locked On. Thanks for making your first listen every single day. Cyclones and Dose Grande.